get started here. It's around 12 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. I'm going to update you on some events that are happening within the chapter, and I also want to thank our sponsor for today. So we'll start with sponsors. At silver level sponsors for the chapter, we have Ecological Energy Systems, Green Spaces, Partners Development and Training. As bronze level sponsors for the chapter, we have Benefield Rickers Design Build Company, Lane Construction, Brewer Ingram Fuller Architects, Elizabeth Easton Architecture, Facility Systems Consultants, Hickory Construction, Johnson Gallion Construction, Knoxville Community Development Corporation, Marvin Concepts, McCarty Polstad and McCarty Architects, Hanley Group, Oak Ridge Associated Universities, S&M Sales and Marketing Consultants, and Shaw Contract Group. So before I introduce our speaker, we have a few upcoming events, education-wise in the chapter. On the 29th, which is next Wednesday, in Johnson City, we have an education event about renewable energy in Tennessee and nationally. On June 21st, we have an Knoxville energy modeling and commissioning talk, and we have a bunch of upcoming sessions as well. We're pretty much filled out for the rest of the year, so definitely check our website, Twitter, or Facebook if you have any interest in further education opportunities. Without further ado, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Miller, Mark Miller. Since 2005, Mark has served as a research scientist for Aquashield Incorporated, headquartered in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He's responsible for company R&D efforts, regulatory affairs, and product performance evaluations. Mr. Miller recently served as technical committee chairman for the Stormwater Equipment Manufacturers Association. He has presented at numerous national and regional conferences on a wide variety of stormwater topics. Mark also has 12 years of experience in environmental consulting, most recently with SNME and Remedial Solutions Incorporated in Chattanooga. He has 12 years of oil and gas exploration experience with Murphy Exploration and Production Company throughout Alaska, South America, China, and the Gulf of Mexico. Mark holds an MS in geology from Centenary College. Is that right, Centenary? Thank you. Centenary College in Shreveport, Louisiana, and a BA in geology from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. He's a registered professional geologist in Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Kentucky. So without further ado, thanks a lot.
Thanks, John. Just about got the SEC cut. So, hey, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here today. I am a geologist, so if you have any math questions, I'll fail those. So, if you ask a geologist or ask an engineer what 2+2 is, and you 4.000, ask a geologist, and I'll say, well, somewhere between 3 and 5. So, what I'm going to talk about today is, I guess the takeaway from it is, from the perspective of low-impact development, is I want you to be able to reach into your best management practice or your BMP toolbox and think of low-impact development as a process or a sequential step process to go through with respect to identifying a technology that you want to use for your stormwater management plan as part of that LID design. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to talk about some technologies that you want to use. I'm going to introduce what I call a LID technology selection pyramid, and it will show you that sequential step of technology selection. Then I also want to talk about, just show you some examples of some devices that are out there. But the real meat of the bulk of my talk is I want to use two examples. One of them being the EPB operations facility, which used to be the Cavalier site. It's now a brownfield, EPA brownfield site, where Jan Pass worked on a project with us, or we worked with her, I should say, on implementing some green infrastructure technology and a retrofit and an environmentally sensitive area because you had the environmental concern to deal with as well. And I also want to show you an example in Hickson at a office building in a small office park over in Hickson, kind of behind Northgate Mall, where we implemented some surface infiltration and underground harvesting. Okay, so those will comprise the bulk of the talk. And again, we've got this toolbox, and I want you to keep that in mind. We're going to reach into that toolbox, and we're going to pull out some things that you may not have considered before. How we can kind of enhance LID with some manufactured devices. AquaShield, we are a manufacturer of stormwater treatment systems, so I have to kind of throw it in. But seriously, there's many devices out there. Certainly we are one of them. But they do allow you to enhance or even complement LID designs. So and that's what we're going to show you today. There's basically three aspects of a stormwater design, and the first one is the sexy. That's design. That's where all your time is spent. Everybody spends all this money, select this, do that, and you put all this effort into it, all your calculations, all your permitting, and all that good stuff. All goes into the design phase. And then we get to the installation. Well, okay, the engineer, you've designed it, the architect, you've designed it, you've worked in collaboration, and then you've gone out for bid, and lo and behold, the most competent contractor with the lowest bid won the job. All right, so they got to go out there and they've got to install this great design. Okay, well, sometimes the balls drop in this phase, and what I'm going to show you is some examples. We're going to learn some lessons on some of these installations and these great ideas. Look great on paper, and they're still functional. Don't get me wrong, but there's some things that we need to consider during the installation phase that would be a good lesson to learn. And thirdly, maintenance. The red-headed stepchild of stormwater management is that out of sight, out of mind. It's below ground. I don't want to deal with it. Oh gee, I forgot I had to maintain that. When am I going to get to clean this thing out every year, every month, what have you? So all three of these go hand in hand, that you need to consider. And of course, this last line here, your B&P, it will fail over time if it's not maintained, ultimately. Some of them you can go for a long time without maintenance. Some of them are very maintenance intensive. So you need to keep that in mind. First, let's go through a brief definition of LID. I know you're all pretty familiar with it, but let's go through it again. But what I want to point out basically is that with LID, we want to mimic pre-development hydrology. In other words, we want to slow the water down, we want to spread it out, we want it to infiltrate. I guess would be the primary goal. And you know, classically, you would have a street going straight through, and this one is an example. Well, they put some curvies in it, and you've extended some of your green area closer to the street, where before your street may have been wider, and you wouldn't have had the benefit of the goal of meeting the LID approach. So that's a general background of what LID tries to do. But when you're going through your process of designing your LID, this is the pyramid that I want to introduce, is that you might want to consider this approach. Let's just walk through it briefly. And that at the beginning, you want to look at surface infiltration. And you can see that your options, I guess the size of the pyramid, or the area of the pyramid, kind of defines the number of options that are available to you there. In other words, there's some pretty straightforward approaches within surface infiltration, but you may be very limited. For example, if you're at a parking lot downtown, surface infiltration may not be even doable. Where you say, oh, I can infiltrate, no problem. I'll just put in permeable paver, right? Well, all right, well, what's a long-term study with respect to permeable asphalt? Will it hold up to high traffic? Will be an issue. Notice, don't forget about installation. Have you ever worked with a contractor who's installed permeable asphalt? Okay, that's a big issue. Yeah, I could go on and on, but the point being is that there's some considerations that you need to consider. For example, one of them is your bedrock shallow. Does your soil perk? Okay, there's some other questions you want to ask. I've got a slide on that. So, subsurface infiltration. Okay, well I can't do it above ground, but maybe I can infiltrate underground. All right, I'll put my impervious asphalt on top. I'll have a nice good surface. I'm going to run all that water into a pipe. I'm going to take it underground, and I'm going to let it infiltrate underground. good idea. But again, like I just mentioned, is your bedrock shallow? Is your soil firm? Can your piping do that? Do you have the space to do that? Does the footprint allow it? So there's issues associated with that. So you're going down your sequence. Let's just say for your site, well, dang it, you can't do that. You can't infiltrate it, either on the surface, you can't infiltrate it underground. Okay, well, let's go to my next option, rainwater harvesting. Well, believe it or not every municipality in the United States of America will allow you to harvest. For example, to the best of my knowledge, Denver, Colorado, you can't harvest the water. It's a no-no. So there's other places out west. In this neck of the woods, it's probably not that big of an issue. But it's something that you need to think about, that you may not be allowed to do it from that perspective. Likewise, do you have the space to do it? Again, you're building a parking lot. Can you harvest? Is it practical? Is it even in the realm of thinking? Maybe not. So you move down. Biofiltration might be a swale, might be a manufactured device, a tree box, or something of that nature. Do you have the green space to allow that to happen? Well, maybe not. So you keep working your way down, and then you get into some treatment train options. And this is what I'm going to talk about mostly in this talk as I move forward eventually, is that we're going to see how these treatment train options can be applied using a separator or filters or biofiltration, how we can use some of these devices or some of these approaches down here at the bottom of the pyramid to meet some of these higher priority goals of the low impact development, such as infiltration. Here's a quick little handy-dandy chart. It shows you the various technologies in your pyramid. And going across, we're going to see what those technologies do in terms of meeting your LID benefit. And again, just kind of self-explanatory. Yeah, you can capture rainfall with a lot of these. You can reduce your peak flow. Remember, we want to slow it down, spread it out. So these devices can help with that. Reduce, what does it say? Reduce your runoff volumes. Some of these devices can help with that. Enhance infiltration, yeah. And what about filter out pollutants? Certainly, especially with your media filtration. And have hydrodynamic separators here. We pretty much limit those to pre-treatment, and you'll see how we actually use a separator for pre-treatment for underground retention at the EPB site, at the Cavalier site. Okay, I'm going to go through a few examples of these various technologies to show you what's out there. No preference in any way, but here we have what I'll call permeable pavers. And this is one where you've got the, we call it drivable grass. And then you've got the air pavers or some type of cellular structure in there to allow the permeability. And the base of these things are very critical to establish during your installation phase. Certainly, you're going to see examples of a grass that looks good in the pamphlets, but we're going to see that they can be kind of problematic on an actual install. There's a number of devices here, brick and things of that nature. Subsurface infiltration, you have some perforated pipes. You've got these big concrete vaults as well. You got linear structures. And again, you got modular HDPE structures as well that allow you to do the subsurface infiltration. Harvesting. Two examples here. You can get them as fancy with your control panels as you like. You can go from low-tech to high-tech on these. Available in all different types of construction materials. So I'm not going to elaborate on the various types of those. They're relatively straightforward. Biofiltration. You may have heard what's affectionately known as a tree box. In other words, you have, these work very well with curved inlets, where you have a tree, if you will, inside a vault. And these things typically infiltrate at about 100, 140 inches per hour, or about 1.5 GPM per square foot. And these are growing in considerable popularity. We have some modular wetlands, more of a linear type of device as well. And this is a small scale, but just natural planters and things of that nature that you can use, parking lot medians, and all different kinds of places. And we're going to see an example at the EPB site of some what I call anyway, biofiltration. And there's some various hybrids of that as well. And this is another tree box design model here. It includes a trash shelf and then a little mini separator and then ultimately your tree box vault over there. So again, there's several designs that are out there. Media filtration. Okay, remember our goals or what our LID benefits are. These are pretty much manufactured devices that can come in canisters or filter beds or things of that nature. And basically, these things, water would go through and it percolates through the filter media. And your filter media can be anywhere from perlite to zeolite, perlite, carbon blends, all different kinds of blends, depending on what you're trying to remove, be it suspended solids or metals or oil or what have you. So these can be very effective, but they do have some drawbacks and they do have to be maintained, but they are very effective. This picture has been around for a while, but it just shows how you can store some water. You can do these in all kind of architecturally, and I understand we've got architects here, so we can do this. You've seen that. And we've got some that aren't so great looking, but they're very effective as well. Underground with the HDPE structures, and these are concrete structures as well. And the last one, hydrodynamic separators. These can come in different varieties, but these are what we'll call a swirl type device. In other words, they set up a vortex inside, and this vortex motion causes the sediments to fall out of suspension. And many of them can also serve to some degree to retain oils, floatable oils as well. They'll retain those up to several inches. Not designed to be an oil water separator by any means, but they can be very effective for the removal of some floatable oils. And these things have various sizing things, and these guys probably get a lot of attention in the regulatory world as well. There's some pros and cons with hydrodynamic separators. Feel free to ask later on what those may be, and we can certainly go into them. But again, these do need maintenance. You have sediment accumulate at the base, and occasionally you do have to pump these guys out as they accumulate sediment and debris as well. They're very effective at catching debris, trash, leaves, and things of that nature. Okay, we're moving on. I'm going to get to the examples. All right. Some questions you might want to ask. A big, long list of questions is the point I'm trying to make. I've already hit on some of these. Is bedrock shallow? Is soil perk? Is groundwater shallow? That's a consideration. Say, for example, you did put in a hydrodynamic separator or a media filtration device. You don't want it to float on you if your groundwater is shallow, so that's something you need to think about. Are you going to have groundwater infiltrating your structure all the time? So that when you do have runoff, the system's already full of water. So how do you deal with that issue? So that can be a big one. Again, your maintenance. I'm just kind of hitting these at random. But, the green space opportunity is a big issue with LID as well. In that when you're wanting to do the surface infiltration, you say, well, I want to have grass, but you may not have the space within which to do that. So again, it's a consideration that you need to make. Long-term use of the property, that's a good one. Yeah, here's one here, a key one. Installation versus operating cost. You always got that balance. I can get into a system, I can get into a design quickly, I can get into it at low cost. Boy, my maintenance is going to eat my lunch later on down the road, and vice versa. So those are things you have to be aware of. Montgomery County, Maryland is an example of a municipality that has a very aggressive maintenance schedule. In other words, they actually, to the best of my knowledge, I got some knowledge of it, but what they do is they actually incorporate any kind of BMP into I guess the deed, if you will, so that the city or the county, actually the county in that case, can actually access that property and maintain those systems. And they have forms they mail out every year that you got to maintain this thing. You got to provide documentation that you maintained it, and they charge you like $162 a year for single-family residence property to maintain it. So their maintenance is a huge issue, and they keep up with it. So if you have there you want to have a system that has a low maintenance cost, because you are required to do maintenance. Whereas we'll pick on Chattanooga, not a whole lot of maintenance going on. My phone's not ringing off the hook. Go maintain these structures. Okay, so again, it's the red-headed stepchild, not a sight out of mind with maintenance. What are your pollutants of concern? Let's say, and this is an issue in Virginia. Virginia has recently done away with the TSS, total suspended solids. Has done away with the TSS requirement entirely. Okay, we all hear about TSS being removed from stormwater. Virginia's done away with it. They've gone to phosphorus, total phosphorus. That's their criteria. Okay. Oh my gosh, how am I going to deal with that? Because if you got grass, you're going to fertilize it, right? Well, you got phosphorus in your fertilizer, right? You got nitrogen too. That's another issue. Anyway, I digress. But phosphorus. So, if you're going to put in a hydrodynamic separator, do you think a separator is going to take out phosphorus? Probably not. Okay. However, here's getting into the science. Well, let me back up. What if you said, okay, if you believe that a separator doesn't remove phosphorus, or would remove a little bit of phosphorus, but not enough, okay? Then you would say, okay, well, what about filtration? Yeah, filtration could probably do pretty good at knocking out your phosphorus. Well, then again, so you got to make sure that you're using the right type of system, the right type of design for whatever your pollutant concern is. So that's a big issue as well. All right, well, I beat that to death. But I just want to let you know that, again, the takeaway is there is a selection process. You need to think about these things when you're doing a design, that you just don't say, well, you can. You shouldn't just say, I want to use grass and put it in, okay? Because there's some issues associated with that, as you said, okay? You need to at least think it through a little bit more. And again, this goes into some things I've already hit on already. I just wanted to make the point that maintenance is very important. Again, if you have biofiltration or a swale, that's not maintenance free. You got to cut the grass. Okay? Who are you going to do to cut the grass? Who are you going to hire to cut the grass? You know. So again, that's something to think about. Okay? All right, well, let's move on. I'm not sure why I put this in, but I guess it goes to say that you know, that obviously that's not a good practice. You know, to have your dumpster full of stuff, and nor is this. But we see it all the time with respect to stormwater and water quality. So this might be what you might think is an LID design, or at least a wetland design, but that's not really providing you the end result that you want. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. All right, let's go to some examples. All right, let's talk about DPP. Any questions so far? All right, let me know if you do. All right, EPB. There's a national cemetery over here. Bailey Avenue overpass, Central Avenue, Railroad Yard. What I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about 3 areas on the property. I'm going to talk about this biofiltration area first, and then I'm going to talk about Hydrodynamic Separator, HDS, combined underground retention. Maybe I should have said retention. subtle difference, but we'll go through that. I'll talk about this area here that's actually underneath the overpass, and underneath the overpass. And we've got another area over here where we have a lesson learned that we want to talk about as well, where we use surface infiltration with another underground detention system. Like I said, Jen Pass, she worked on this, and we're not going to slam her today, but I'm sure she can answer any questions that I can't fully say. All right, here we go. First of all, in case you're not familiar with it, many of you probably are, I used to make old Coca-Cola stuff here, and it goes way back. Cavalier plant goes way back to right after the Civil War. And it's pretty interesting history to go through all that stuff. I enjoy this kind of stuff. But made old wooden ice boxes, and they got here with the electric chests, and they got in the Coca-Cola stuff pretty good here during the war, and kept going on and on. But basically in the 80s, they stopped any kind of manufacturing to speak of. They piddled around with some start and stop efforts, I believe, to the best of my memory anyway. And then in the 1990s, it obviously became a environmental issue, an eyesore, etc., and all kinds of bad press. And finally, in 2007, after the environmental issues had been at least addressed, no cleanup yet, but other than some excavation, finally got the EPA brownfield designation, and I believe that designation is still in effect today, but I'm not real sure, but it's either here or there for this talk. And then in 2010, EPB purchased 11 acres of this area, I guess the entire area, and in case you're not aware of it, that's where they're storing all their line trucks and a bunch of their equipment, and there's about 200 employees down there, so it's a big operation going on there today. What this picture shows is some in the biofiltration area. You see the overpass right there, the Bailey Avenue overpass. We're trying to use some of the existing hard pavement and I guess some new pavement in here. And we have some surface infiltration going on within this little bit of depressed area. And Jan, I will need your help here. What are these two manholes for, and where does the piping with those go?
That's the overflow, pond overflow grates. And it goes into an existing underground sanitary sewer overflow chamber. But we discovered that.
Okay. All right. So, does that run towards the top of the screen?
It runs toward the top and then down the alley.
And then out. And then out there? Okay. All right. That's what I thought. All right. So anyway, we can see that this is a very conventional design. And here's the after picture. And the benefits, let's talk about this just for a second. What were our LID goals? We wanted to slow the water down, we wanted to spread it out, we wanted to infiltrate, right? Okay, so we want to mimic those pre-development hydrology. So what this does, it allows us to reduce our runoff. In other words, water comes off these impervious surfaces and we go into the infiltration areas. So we're reducing our runoff volume, if you will. We're treating our runoff close to the source. In other words, it's not an end-of-pipe solution, which would be like a more conventional approach. It does give us a green space opportunity. Very effective for filtering out pollutants. So we're filtering out our metals that can come off the cars. We're filtering out our suspended solids. We're filtering out some residual oils. Okay? All right, so it's doing a very good job of that. And we're allowing groundwater recharge, okay, mimicking our pre-development hydrology, okay, and on the slide, I won't pull that down, I won't mess it up, but what we call the heat island effect. It's not a big topic in this neck of the woods, but up in New Jersey, it is. Land of concrete and asphalt. It's becoming a big issue. So it does get hot up in New Jersey. But it's an issue there. So, you know, it's kind of common sense. The more green space you have, the better it's going to do. So that was a pretty straightforward design of how you can meet an LID benefit. But now let's look at a way on how we can actually kind of integrate some goals of LID with some manufactured systems. Plus, and this is a very key issue when you're dealing with urban development, is using the existing infrastructure. You see that little guy right there? To the best of my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, Jan, but this water that's going to collect in this area that's excavated is going to exit through that existing pipe. So in order to utilize what's there, so we're not ripping up old pipe and putting in new stuff, we can do the retrofit, utilize what's there, and what can we do upstream to facilitate the use of that choke point. Okay? So the idea here was to calculate a retention area close to the building, keeping in mind the trucks are going to drive over this. But we have one little problem you got to think about. Remember, this is an EPA brownfield site. We got contaminated soil. Alright? So whenever we're excavating, we got to go, is it contaminated or not? Okay? Because they had pre-existing drilling, but it's Swiss cheese. You're not going to have a sample point on every location where you're excavating. So you're going to be filling in the gaps, if you will, while you're excavating. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. I just did this for illustrative purposes. These little dark areas, my question is that foundry sand? Okay? Because foundry sand's white. Okay? And there was a big volcano in Chattanooga years ago that spewed out foundry sand all over downtown Chattanooga. Okay? It's everywhere. It's pervasive. We have to look for that. And basically the biggest issue associated with foundry sand is total petroleum hydrocarbons, or TPH, or maybe some other metals in it as well. So, and I use this for illustrative purposes, is when you found an area that was potentially impacted, that had to be segregated. Okay? And so that stockpile, using this as an example, would have to be screened before you could put it back in or haul it off or whatever. You had to make sure it was okay. So that was an operational concern. But also, remember, the deeper you go, the more potential you have to find more dirty soil, right? So you have to think, if I'm going to store a certain amount of water, how big of an area do I have to have? Then you need to think about your footprint, okay? I've got to think three-dimensional, okay? So what this project tried to do was minimize your depth of excavation. And what was chosen were these HDPE modules, if you will, to withstand the HS20 or HS20 or H20 loading. It gives you significant void space. And in this particular case, it gave you 49,000 gallons of storage. And these things stack up. Well, wait, back up. There's, the way it works is, here we go. There's an impervious liner that was placed down. And then there was a layer of stone. And the stone, calculate the void space for that size stone. Was that number 57? Okay. So we use a number 57 stone here to give us the porosity. And we use a permeable filter fabric, a geotextile fabric, that would allow water to seep through that fabric into the additional storage volume from the stone underneath those modules. Okay? So again, we had that choke point with our limited piping, their piping size. So we had to accommodate all that water in the structure. Here's another view of it, where we minimize the excavation depth and the soil disturbance. You see this just during the installation process. Those modules are, I don't know, yay big. They're lightweight. One person can pick up one module, so they're not heavy. So this can all be done manually. There you can see the perspective of the thing and of the underground feature against the building. Limited space, but the question is, okay, well, what do I want to use upstream of that underground structure to filter out or to clean out or remove, I should say, all the sediment or debris to keep it from going in there? Because remember, maintenance. Okay, so we don't want our underground structure to get all plugged up. So in this particular case, a 4-foot diameter hydrodynamic separator, let's see if this thing was installed to give you the pre-treatment. This design, I'll get a little specific for a minute, but the piping came in, it goes through the swirl, it swirls around, and it exits in a what we'll call a horseshoe pattern. You can exit just about anywhere you want to on this particular model, but it does come in and it's horseshoes so that you can minimize the piping footprint to it. And our high flows will actually bypass the structure. And a question some people ask about bypass is, why would I want to bypass anything? Well, that's going to if I let dirty water go downstream, I'm defeating the whole purpose. Well, actually, bypass, if you think about it, only occurs when you have high flow. Okay? So the first flush has already come through. Right? So the dirty stuff has already been caught. Okay? So by the time the high flow comes, you've got relatively clean water later in the storm. Okay? So the bypass shouldn't be that big of a deal, and that's a common practice. And this particular device had all the credentials to support it, and there are ways to size these devices, sizing charts and whatnot. So here's the completed product. Nice rainy day, and what benefits did we meet from the LID design approach? Well, number one, we provided water quality, and we also addressed our flow volume issue, okay, to meet the existing infrastructure that was already there. So we had limited space, a lot of room here, can't mess with those pillars, right? And we allowed our heavy traffic loading. It's not necessarily a green thing, but this approach did allow us to meet the intended uses of the property. Okay? All right, let's go to that third area over there by the railroad tracks, if you remember, where we had the surface infiltration. And this is another similar approach. We have to worry about our potential soil contamination, and we Jan calculated up the area that we needed with the stone and the modules. So all the volumes were accounted for. And we had this nice little strip of land over there. Here you can see in the background, that's a stockpile that's covered. So that stuff probably is impacted with some type of contamination. You know, our stone, liners, and all that good stuff. And there's close-ups of the modules you can see. Those are just there for convenience as they stack them up. It's building out. There's the wrap, filter wrap around it. It's a permeable wrap. Okay. Give us 26,000 gallons of storage. And I don't believe I had the picture here. Jan, was there another pipe right there at that end of it? Or somewhere in there?
There's an overflow structure on the right.
Yeah, that's an overflow structure. Where did this water go once it exited?
Fill up the tank and there's some openings in that structure, more down small.
Okay.
So it fed that whole gas structure. It's a convoluted.
Okay.
It goes back into the same line that goes down out.
Okay, so it went back to where our choke point was before. Okay, so again, we're retrofitting.
Where does it eventually go to?
To the city stormwater system.
And then from the stormwater system to the river?
Yes.
Yeah, following treatment. Yeah, Chattanooga system doesn't have a separate, it's basically a CSO, combined sewer overflow, as opposed to a separate stormwater and sanitary sewer system. All right, well, here's the boss, foreman out there saying, let's wrap it up. So they install it, and I'll show you a little close up here. This is the area. There is some relief on the site to give some flow into it from the surface. All right. Here's the idea. Okay, I'm going to tell you the final product today doesn't look like this. Okay, this was what it was intended to do. So here's a lesson learned. All right. What we wanted to do is we put in these concrete, what we call muffin mats, or I call them biscuits. But they come in a sheet, if you will, and they're heavy, and they're concrete, and look like the size of a biscuit, and there's a lattice in there. And the idea is that you put this, that the grass would actually grow in the spaces between those biscuits, okay? And what the grass would do is, number one, give you a green space, okay, give you some green, right? It accomplishes the filtration, allows you to filter out pollutants, okay? That's important. What else does it do? Well, it meets a lot of the LID benefits, okay? All right, so with that said, oh yeah, here we go. We can on the slide. We're treating runoff close to the source, and we're in a limited space. All right, so there's your overflow structure. Well, this is, you see the trees in the background, so it's a cold time of year, and this will release it. Yeah, and so we put in some grass here. You see some hay and straw, and lo and behold, what happened is that when you got a, and I've talked with EPB representative about it, is what happened was when you got a large storm, it went into bypass, and it went into bypass very quickly, right? So what happened was when this initial grass died out, it didn't make it into the warmer months, or drier months of the summer. What happened was when this grass dried out, it allowed for dirt, i.e. clay, if you will, to plug up the lattice between those biscuits, right? So we all know what clay does, it won't allow flow through it, right? So it would back up. And so it was very critical that you get this grass established in here to keep the permeability within that lattice structure to allow the infiltration. And this one didn't quite do it, okay? So what they did was they took out about a 4-foot square area and replaced it with gravel. Took this muffin mat structure out and put gravel on the surface, and they just simply watched it. That's all that did. And lo and behold, that did the trick, okay? So the surface water was able to infiltrate through that gravel, and they could clearly see that out here in this area where the lattice had gotten plugged up, that they weren't getting the intended design at high flows. Low flows it worked great. Okay, but at high flows it was definitely a challenge. So what they ended up doing, unfortunately, is taking this out and refilling it with gravel, and now it works great. That's all I'm told. It's unfortunate that this didn't take, but again, remember those 3 pillars installation, 3 pillars of stormwater. The installation is a key ingredient to any successful plan, and it looked good when it was initially implemented, but unfortunately it either wasn't maintained, this grass didn't take, it was the wrong kind of grass, something went wrong, but it basically fell to the grass, simply stated. Because this material does work. I have an example at my office that uses it. It does work when gravel is in the spaces, and when there's dirt or clay in there, it doesn't work. So that's one of the drawbacks of this particular design. So it was a lesson learned. So we all like to show nice, pretty pictures, but it's important that we do understand what goes right and what goes wrong. Or not so right, let's put it that way. All right, any questions on the EPV? How am I doing on time?
We have about 15 minutes.
Okay, great, perfect. Okay. All right, this is a office building in Hickson, behind Northgate Mall, if you will. Y'all know where Adams Road is, behind Northgate Mall, where Racket Club is in Hickson. It's very near there. It's in a small office park. And the owner of this building wanted to, they wanted to be LEED inspired, but realized they couldn't do everything. So they wanted to do what they could. And they wanted to be a steward in the environment. And they wanted to maximize their land use on a 1.2 acre site. Wanted to reduce potable water use where they could. Wanted a return on investment and enhance their equity if possible, even from the green infrastructure. So with all these things in mind, how could they address their stormwater needs, or how could they implement an LID approach to a rather conventional development? Well, there was a ring road in the site. There's a sanitary sewer that cuts right through the property, okay? And there are easements on both sides of that sewer line, so you couldn't construct anything inside that area. Well, the building, the office building, was going to be here, and that was a done deal. That was how big it was going to be. And the idea was, in the conventional design, that we put in a detention pond. Very conventional approach. And the owner wanted to build an outlier office building, Class A office rental building, to rent out. Okay? So with this design allowed, this is in the city limits, Chattanooga, allowed for the parking spaces, here, and all around. Okay? So it allowed for 89% land use. The owner wanted to say, well, how can I maximize my land use? What can I do for the environment, et cetera, enhance my value of the property? Went with a harvesting approach. Okay? We're actually showing, I'm going to show you some graphs later on how harvesting actually allowed to accomplish that. We typically think of harvesting to put a tank or a building or something like that and use that water. Very simple approach. But here, we're going to use harvesting as a value-added approach. So, keeping the building right there, underneath, right there, is underground storage. It's going to fit right in that area. This building is still allowed to keep all its parking, but look at the rental building. It allows for a larger building. Our pond is taken away, and we also get more parking area. It's not over there with our option number 1. So they decided to go, let's go with plan B. So we gained additional rental space that we wouldn't have had. We got additional parking space that we didn't have. We still met our sewer restriction and got our parking. Okay? What we're also using is we're using infiltration in our parking areas. Okay? I'll show you pictures of that as well. In other words, we have intended to have grass in these green areas. In the parking, you would actually come in, drive on the grass, and park on the gravel. A little bit of a paradigm shift. Had to put up signs, drive on the grass. Okay, people wouldn't drive on the grass. So, a little bit different here. All right? Anyway, came up with, went through all these calculations. I think this is from Metcalf and Eddy. Went through all the calculations with the number of people in the building, et cetera, how they use their various waters. But anyway, when it's all said and done, the owner got this gold star where they could have a reduction of 51% in their potable water use. They're using their water for irrigation, using it for a fountain, and using it to flush their toilets, all from the rainwater runoff. Okay, all by city code. Here's how it works. The roof runoff, 7,500 square feet of roof runoff plus some surface runoff, goes into this junction manhole, goes to a hydrodynamic separator for pre-treatment, goes to a filtration device to polish it off, So you're getting about 90% removal of the suspended solids through that treatment train. Goes to a 13,000 gallon underground storage thing. And again, that water goes for irrigation, goes to toilets, and goes to the fountain. Here's what it looks like. There's the separator. This is a sample location for some testing. Fortunate enough to be able to put in. There's a filter device, another sample location. There's your storage tank and your effluent coming out. That's a 3-foot diameter separator. Okay? So it's not a very large filter. Finished product. There's the grass in the background. You come in, you drive in here. This is during the installation. That's why nobody's parking on it. You come in, you can see the gravel there. That's your car parked on. You would drive in on the grass. And of course, the fountain. The storage structure is made out of the same HDPE modules that we saw at EPB. And that weighs, we calculate about 30,000 pounds, 35,000 pounds, something like that when there's water in that fountain. All right, here's the ubiquitous busy slide. If you just put in the no rainwater recovery and you only had the detention pond, your cost would have been $17,400. But if you put in the extra harvesting, your initial cost was almost $22,000. But you would recoup those costs in a number of months based on the additional income that you get from that rental building. So there are all kinds of calculations that were done on this. So the idea being, simply stated, trying to enhance the equity in the property, although your investment was upfront higher, ultimately you'll get that paid back and you can start to make money. There's the grass, there's the fountain. Another benefit here is basically you're using water that otherwise would have been lost. In other words, you're harvesting that water that you didn't need potable water for. Okay? The other thing is that you're able to use potable water elsewhere within the water district. Okay? So you're just saving some water so they can put it to another development, another building somewhere down the road. So, with all that said, come back to our pyramid. We've seen how you can incorporate some treatment trains. We've seen the sequential process to help you select your technology and your LID design. And there's our picture. It's all about clean water. And there's our disclaimer. And again, there's contact me for any additional information, and certainly James for any additional information as well. And again, it was an honor to be here. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So Mark, I guess we're going to take questions. We have about 10 minutes till 1 right now. I'm going to pass out course evaluations and your certificates will be given out at the end when you return your evaluations. Yeah, if anyone has any questions for Mr. Miller, please feel free.
Do any of these strategies affect the stormwater fees that are assessed?
Excellent question. On the building example, the idea was yes. The city of Chattanooga, as you know, has stormwater fees, and the intent was to get a reduction or a waiver of fees because of infiltration. Okay, that was the intent. Right? So, unfortunately, the process requires that you have to demonstrate your infiltration capabilities. It's not a, do you have infiltration? Yeah, you get a simple thing. It's not that simple. So we have to go through the calculations, and they actually had to hire a surveyor to go out and delineate all the areas of infiltration. It had to be surveyed in. It had to be, it was a project. Okay? And then when it was all said and done, unfortunately, the way the fee structure is that the cost of the survey was more than the reduction over a number of years. For example, if the survey was $1,000, and they were able to save $100 on their annual fee. Payback would have been 10 years. Okay, using that simple example. Okay, the fees were actually different, but as an example. So they decided that it just wasn't working. So they just paying the regular fees. But in theory, it would have given you a reduction in stormwater fees.
So that's only going to work on really big projects where the cost.
The way Chattanooga is set up, that's correct. That's the way it's looking. And this was the first time, to my knowledge, that Chattanooga dealt with the issue. So I don't know if the department will be more open to it now. And we face this all the time with the infiltration approach. And it's a tough battle. It really is. And it's unfortunate that's the way it is here. Anyway, I don't know if Knoxville and Nashville are different. I don't have direct experience with their fees.
How big was the project? How many acres was the project?
It was a 1.2 acre property, right? The building had 75. They used 7,500 square feet of roof runoff. Okay, the 13,000 gallon underground storage tank was pretty much taken out of the air. It wasn't designed with any type of annual rainfall. It is in an area where there is already a pond behind the building. I probably should have pointed out more clearly, so that when that tank does get full, it can bypass and it goes to the pond that the whole development uses. Okay, so it's not just for that building; it was already pre-existing. So if they wanted to handle all the water, then they would have needed to have a larger tank. But it worked out well.
I just have a question. You had mentioned the municipality that tracks phosphorus. How do you get rid of phosphorus?
How do you get rid of phosphorus?
Or like, what would you do to eliminate or minimize the amount of phosphorus?
Yeah. Virginia, the state of Virginia has switched to phosphorus. Florida, it's a big issue as well. Most approaches are filtration, and it's a matter of do you do adsorption, which the adsorption versus absorption. Adsorption is where the molecule, if you will, would adhere to the outside surface of the filter media. Absorption is when that molecule element will be absorbed into the structure of the media. Okay, and there's two types of media systems that are out there. One for adsorption and absorption. I'm familiar with adsorption on the surface. It is my technology. It works pretty well. The other works very well too.
I mean, I assume like that it's for a greater level of filtration. So like, do you think that other municipalities are going to do something like that? Or do they have a particular issue in this, in like Virginia?
Yeah, Virginia has a particular issue with the Chesapeake Bay watershed because most of the water and most of the people in Virginia live within that watershed. Okay, and they have a huge issue. I won't say terrible, that's the wrong word. They have a huge issue with oysters and fishing and algal blooms, because the algae will take up the oxygen, so you get low dissolved oxygen, so you get fish kills in the waters, and so it's harmful to their economy. And however, they didn't address nitrogen, and nitrogen is just as bad a culprit. And in fact, Maryland, in their infinite wisdom, taking it to the extreme with filtration, they only allow organic media, like leaf compost, which emits nitrogen. So we argued this with these guys, like, what are you thinking? You know, but hey, that's my opinion. But it does require a higher level of sophistication to remove phosphorus. That is true. And the approval process for technologies in Virginia is very rigorous, including lab testing and extensive multi-year field testing. So it's a huge process. Great. Thanks again. I appreciate it very much.
Okay.